Thank you, and welcome to our opening panel session. I'm delighted to be joined on the panel this morning by fellow colleagues from a variety of professional bodies. So we have with us Richard Bennett from CISI, Alison Stiles from the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. We have Daniel Pedley from CII and my colleague Mark Roberts from the Chartered Banking Institute. Our first session is focusing on the role of professional bodies in preparing people for the future. So hopefully we're going to have lots of answers to our questions, because if we don't know, then we've not got much hope here. But I think we'll have lots of good discussion and lots of good answers. Before we start this session, I'm just going to hand over to each of the panellists to do a brief introduction about their current role and how they're involved in developing future talent. We're then going to complete a number of questions of the panellists, and then we'll hand over to the audience for any additional questions that you might have. So to start us off, Richard, I'll just come to you to give us a bit of overview of your current role.
Thank you, Joanne. Richard Bennett. I'm Head of Membership at the Chartered Institute of Securities and Investments. I helped develop our CPD log many years ago, 11 years ago now, and of course that is one of the main aspects of continuing to develop that. I've also been involved in launching and the setting of our 3 apprenticeship standards in investment operations. I'm still involved in that, particularly with the need for endpoint assessment and continuing to drive those standards, and also help firms understand what apprenticeships are available. And I suppose the third hat I have at the Institute is working with schools and universities, trying to embed some of our qualifications into schools and universities, and make sure that those younger professionals are employable for people like yourselves, and help them get up to certain standards to enter the industry. So that's my role at the Institute.
Thanks, Richard. Alison?
Hello, I'm Alison Stiles from ICAEW. I'm the Head of Business Development, so I work very closely with employers to ensure that our syllabus is up to date and relevant for employer and student needs. We've just done a major consultation with employers about incorporating technology into the accountancy syllabus, and also updating our professional skills framework to ensure it's fit for purpose as students develop key sets of professional skills for a rapidly evolving technological world. Like Richard, I sit on the employer group for apprenticeships as well, for the accountancy apprenticeships, and have helped employers set up a number of apprenticeship schemes in accountancy, and I've also worked closely with universities to set up employer-sponsored degrees where students can accelerate work experience and combine that with a degree and a professional qualification. So that's me.
Thank you, Alison. Daniel?
Hello everybody, I'm Daniel Pedley from the Chartered Insurance Institute. I'll move that down a bit. And my role, I head up our activity on apprenticeships and also the wider skills agenda. Like the rest of the panel, I've been involved in Trailblazers. I've been on, I think, 6 different apprenticeship Trailblazers now. I also sit on the Scottish Apprenticeships Advisory Board, the Frameworks and Standards Group, which you also sit on, and the Department for Education's T-level finance panel, which is something quite new, and I sit on that with Simon. As well as apprenticeships, I'm starting to get involved in HE, so we're having conversations with universities on where insurance sits, because not many people think about insurance when they think HE, so there's potential there, and as I say, just the wider skills policy, so looking at the government skills plan, etc., and keeping an eye out for the careers education piece, which will be coming out soon, and getting involved with DFE on that.
Thank you, Daniel.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Roberts. I'm from the Chartered Banker Institute. To continue the theme, I look after learning partnerships, which encompasses engagement with employers and learners around our qualifications, and also engagement with our range of partners, which include other professional bodies, universities, training providers. It'll probably come as no surprise, having listened to some of the other panellists, that I've also been involved in the development of apprenticeships under the new format of Trailblazers, and I can sympathise with your 6 streams. I've lost count by now of how many we've been involved with. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So just to start us off, we've got quite a wide first question, and it's to do with the arrival of the Internet of Things and information at everybody's fingertips. And the question really relates to is what is the role of professional bodies, and how do they continue to add value in a constantly changing environment? And I'm going to come to Richard first of all with that question.
Thanks for that. I think the most important aspect for professional bodies is, of course, to always remain modern and relevant, but also not to lose the traditions that have been built up over the many years. We believe we play a very important role in supporting learners, members, and businesses through the setting of the standards of professional excellence and integrity. Exactly what Simon said. And we mustn't lose the fact of that with all the changing environment. It's already been touched on by some of the panel. For us to remain relevant as a professional body, we need to continue to engage with the industry and gain input from practitioners. And we have over 750 practitioners, I'm sure similar to the other professional bodies, that work with us to make sure that everything that we offer is relevant to the modern professional. But also, what we mustn't forget is professional bodies are there for the good of the general public as well, and making sure that customers and clients are actually meeting with the professionals. When we say professionals, it's all around that professionalism, the blend of the knowledge, skills, and behaviour. And again, I will get on to some of the changes. But of course, people will only do business with people they trust, and we mustn't forget that. As people they trust who are knowledgeable and have the best interests at their hearts as well. And I think that's where professional bodies can help support professionals throughout their careers. Of course, for us, looking at 4 people right in front of me, we've got to remain appealing to the younger professionals. We've got to move with the ever-changing regulatory environment, but also the technological environment as well. So we've got to make sure that what we offer our members is available to them wherever they are, whatever time they want, and whatever medium they're actually wanting to gain access to that. Which very much leads into our CPD and our online learning of CPD. But we've got to also be conscious that people learn in different ways. And it's not always about face-to-face, but that's very important. But there's all these bite-sized chunks that we're told that youngsters only have that attention span for about 15 to 20 minutes. So we've got to make sure that what we develop and what we offer is appealing to across a wide range of individuals. But I mentioned the face-to-face, and we mustn't lose the importance of people relationships as well. We're seeing an increasing demand for face-to-face learning. So although yes, technology is important, face-to-face learning and actually enabling members to network with their peers, very much like what you'll be doing today, is very, very important, and we mustn't lose the fact of that. But we must make sure that we remain appealing to members and attract those younger people into this profession, because they are the lifeblood of profession, but also for professional bodies as well.
Thank you, Richard. Alison from the accountancy world, any building on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the rate of change of technology that we're experiencing is really significant, but for ICAEW, that's very much part of our DNA. We were born in a time of industrial turbulence. We were created in response to huge changes in technology and the need to account for those clearly and give transparency and to support the public interest. You know, that was in the time of railways being a new technology. So it's part of our DNA to be relevant. And that's something that we've always maintained, as Richard says, with the importance of stakeholder consultation. So we very much closely engage with our employers, with our student population, with our partners in learning to make sure that we retain that relevance. And I think a key focus for us at the moment around that is around the development of professional skills and the recognition that when the environment is changing so rapidly, interestingly, the PwC report about the workplace in 2030 referenced it a couple of months ago. You're valuable as a bundle of skills almost, rather than a kind of career title that you might have had in the past. It's your cumulative bundle of skills that you take with you that creates value. So for us as an institute, developing adaptability, resilience, the ability to collaborate, constantly having a curious and an inquisitive mind so that people are well equipped to deal with that world of technological change is key, and that's very much embedded in our professional development framework. So that's a key area for us. And I think as the Internet of Things becomes more and more common in the workplace, portfolio careers become more common. It's easier for people to move from one place of work to another, and therefore actually having the membership of a professional body as a sort of badge of credibility and something to belong to becomes even more significant, and we really want to offer that and provide that as a valuable service to our members going forward.
Thank you. Mark, just building on that, what would you say or what changes are you seeing in the services that professional bodies are offering to their members, and how do you see that changing in the future in terms of delivery and development?
Yeah, I was very interested in some of the themes that Alison and Richard had covered there. I think, as ever with this stuff, there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, we're seeing opportunities and challenges in equal measure posed by technology. I think as a parent with 3 children between 6 and 16, I can see firsthand how they start to use technology to learn differently. For example, the services that you would see through Google and services you'd see through Alexa or Siri, I'm sure other parents in the room may have a nod of recognition here, are performing as least as important a role in the education of their children as I think I am as a parent. And learning to harness these technologies, I think, is very important. These things are learning literally by the hour, so in another hour's time they will be at least more effective than they are now. I think, echoing Alison's point, one of the important transferable skills that we as institutes can help inculcate in learners is stressing the importance of analysis and critical thinking as part of this. With the wealth of information that's available to the learner now, I think there's a truly baffling array of sources that you could go to seek understanding around a particular subject. But it's knowing how to reflect on that, how to critique that, and how to compare that, that's perhaps going to be a bigger part of our portfolio going forward.
Thanks, Mark. Daniel, anything from your perspective?
It's the digital element obviously is the big shift where we're moving a lot of our services online, and it's being allowing professionals to access it whenever, wherever, and having choice and being able to choose from an a la carte menu rather than the set menus that professional bodies might have offered in the past. Now you can choose different pathways, etc. And that's not to say that offering that choice then you create some kind of spaghetti junction that is bewildering. There is also in that an element of simplification, and I'm thinking career pathways within our world. They're quite opaque at the minute, and what we need to do in future is to unpick those a little bit for people, especially coming in, because you look at you walk down Career Street and you can see shops. Banking is much better than insurance in that you can kind of see where you get to go. Insurance has got frosted windows and you're never quite sure what's behind them. And so as a professional body, we've got to get rid of that frosting. So then when you look through the window, you know that if you start here, you can end up there, or there. And so there is that piece of of guiding future professionals to various destinations.
So I think both raised really good points about the technology and giving people choice, and I think that's that's something that everyone's becoming aware of, and how we embody that at professional bodies. But I think Richard, you raised a good earlier point as well about that sort of the human element and the face-to-face contact. So have you seen in your services at CISI, where's the sort of growth areas for you where you're seeing change?
Very much so. It might have something to do that we've introduced mandatory CPD for all of our members as well, not just for chartered and regulated individuals. But yeah, face-to-face, we're seeing that growing demand, and we need to be, and that's I think what Daniel's talking about, that choice. People need to have that choice, whether it is they want to have face-to-face learning. And of course, by them coming to professional bodies events and other events, it's given them a different opinion, a different voice from what the firms are saying. And you can't lose that networking opportunity, which I think is really important. And that's where professional bodies add value in that respect. But what we're also seeing is, though, time is of the essence. So gone are the days where we used to just offer 1 hour of CPD. We need to be offering 3, 4 all-day sort of sessions for our members, because time is very important to them. So we've got to adapt to that as well.
So how do we maintain the collective responsibility of the industry and its professional bodies to the wider public? How is that maintained? Mark, any initial thoughts on
that? I think, there's been some interesting recent developments. One significant development is the Chartered Bodies Alliance in recent times, which gives us an opportunity to have a common voice amongst currently CISI and the Chartered Insurance Institute. Here are 3 bodies that have very similar philosophies in terms of their view of the importance of professional qualifications, the importance of aspiring to chartered level, and equally the importance of continuing professional education. I think part of the challenge for CPD for any professional body now is the diverse range of interests from our members themselves. While we would undoubtedly have areas of expertise such as insurance and financial markets, retail banking, the interests of our members would clearly go beyond those. I think just picking up on one of the earlier points, the nature of networking is changing a little bit. More networking is going on online now, at least as much is probably going on online for many people as actually happens physically now through apps such as LinkedIn. And it's being able to harness this really fluid environment that I think is a real challenge, but equally a good opportunity for us.
So just moving on from that, Daniel, so that responsibility, so the other aspect of the professional body is that responsibility of the public. Any thoughts on how you think that's maintained?
For me, it's as professions doing things voluntarily. So not waiting for the regulatory stick to come and beat us, because if we're gonna raise public trust, we've got to be seen to get our own house in order rather than being dictated to by somebody else. I think when you start from that position, it's a much more positive one, and thinking can be a lot more free. And I look back a few years ago into insurance, and we had the Aldermanbury Declaration, which saw swathes of the sector sign up voluntarily to improving professional standards and developing talent, and that shows what can be done if you get firms together, have a collective goal, and then that plays much better to the outside world, especially so the conversation that we have with Treasury and the regulator, because then they don't necessarily have to do anything. It takes something off their list of things to do, and as I say, it then plays much better out in the outside world, because you're taking it upon yourselves rather than just being told you must sort yourselves out.
Okay, thank you. So moving on from that and the sort of role of apprenticeships, so I'm going to come to Alison here. What lessons can be learned from other professions and industries, and can you share any examples of what works and what doesn't work in your experience, Alison?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of successful apprenticeship programs, they tend to work at their best where there's very strong employer engagement and commitment to the program, where often that's sponsored by a senior sponsor in the business, and people are very clear about who the apprenticeship cohort is. Sometimes there are misconceptions around apprenticeships in terms of who they're available to. You know, now apprenticeships are open to graduates, to returners to work, as well as to school leavers. So I think making that very clear that it's a sort of broad-ranging cohort makes people understand in the business what the benefits are and who the cohort is. It helps engagement. I think having very clear line manager understanding about what the apprenticeship commitment involves and how they can support and what the expectations are is really important. And having a clear tripartite agreement between the apprentice, the tuition provider and the employer is very important. You know, all of those things help. I don't think any of those things are rocket science in particular, but those are the things that tend to be very effective. In terms of what probably doesn't work, it's when it becomes very bureaucratic and box ticking and a sort of, you know, one size fits all kind of sledgehammer set of rules that everybody has to comply with, then that becomes a lot more difficult.
Have you got anything to add to that?
I think it's a new world, and the introduction of the standards and then the levy. We can learn a lot from sectors who have got it right in the old world, but I guess we've got an opportunity to find out answers for ourselves and what works for us. So that although you can learn from others, I think there's a lot upon us as professional bodies to educate employers and working with employers to find out what works for us. And it is that point about one size doesn't fit all, and that's kind of the wrestling with government that we've probably all had in developing the standards, and as the rules change almost on a daily basis, making sure that what gets created actually works for us as a sector.
So
can I just add to that as well? I think one of the things that with the work that I do with schools is trying to better educate schools about apprenticeships as well. Because a lot of schools and the career people within that don't fully understand what apprenticeships are and that it's a viable route instead of just going to university. So there's a lot of work that we as professional bodies can help with that. And in our sector, in the financial services, it is changing that mindset. Graduates are very much the norm, but it's just trying to change, and also the perception of apprenticeships. I've spoken to many firms who just think, oh, apprenticeships, that's not for us in our environment, when it very much is. And also trying to get them to understand that they can, it's not just for new people, which is great to have some younger new people joining the industry, but it's also to upskill those existing colleagues as well. And that's probably some opportunities that firms aren't quite grasping at present in that respect.
And that's where the shift will come in terms of attitudes at school, parental level. When you've got, because looking at our sector and how firms are approaching apprenticeships, new talent is only a small part, and they're using it to upskill existing staff. So in time, I hope I'm not being naive here, that those existing members of staff who then are upskilled via apprenticeships, when they've got kids making the choices, they might say, right, apprenticeships, I've seen firsthand what they can do, you should consider it, don't just think about university. And that, I suppose the fundamental problem there is that schools are pushed basically to get people to university, and until that changes, that we'll always be up against that. But I think the way that apprenticeships can be used should help to start to change attitudes, but it is like turning a tanker around.
It's an interesting point though, because in the SAB work group that we were on for apprenticeships and the frameworks, the Scottish Government were doing a lot of work actually just in a whole communication programme to parents about the opportunities that the apprenticeships were providing, just to get that sort of mindset and understanding and get that narrative built. So So it's a well-made point.
We've produced a guide for parents and careers advisors, and it has case studies in. And the one that always sticks in my mind is a young lady who decides to do an insurance apprenticeship, and I think it's with AXA. And she goes home, tells her mom, and her mom bursts into tears. She's like, "Oh, I want you to go to university." It's like, "Well, no, this is a job, and I'm going to learn, and I've got my career in front of me." And it all turns out to be wonderful because she's progressing in the firm. But it is that initial reaction that the world's caving in. But apprenticeships are great.
So moving on from that, and Richard, I'm going to ask you this question first: is so what stage in the education journey are professional bodies important?
Well, I'm sure everybody won't be surprised to hear, and it's probably the same for everybody across the panel, that we believe that professional bodies are important throughout that lifelong journey of learning. Whether that's at the starting off at schools and universities, where we can influence individuals of deciding whether they want to come into this sector, and also helping them by offering them some qualifications as well. So it gets them through the door. I want to say helping them get through the door. I was speaking to a firm who had 15 job vacancies, but they had 1,500 applications for that. And when I was asking them about how do you screen that, they were just saying simply the first part is, what have they done in financial services? Anything, whether that's work experience, whether that's gone out on some internships or taken some other qualifications or done some sort of CPD around financial services, that will get them onto the next stage. So we as professionals can help them in that aspect. But of course, when they enter the industry then, we've already talked about the professional qualifications that each professional bodies offer. Some of those are regulatory and they must get those qualifications, but there are others. It's all about people development and raising those skills, raising those standards of competence. And of course, for those existing members, learning just doesn't stop in that respect. And we use this strapline of we are your competitive edge throughout your career. Because of course there's the CPD side of things. So I believe CPD now is just as important as the qualifications individuals get when they enter the sector, because they've got to remain relevant, they've got to remain competent, and professional bodies can help them achieve that.
Okay. Anything to add?
Not much to add to that. I think the only thing I would add, and echoing everything that you say, is I think it's important for professional bodies not to lose track of what their members can offer back in return, and also to the wider membership. I think where perhaps we as organisations need to get a little bit smarter is making sure that through our members we are keeping up with developments in the industry. When I think of our own membership, I mean, there's a wealth of knowledge and understanding around our membership, which we do our best to extract. But realistically, with over 30,000 members, I'm sure there are many useful things that we can learn back from our membership to reflect into our educational products and services.
Thanks, Mark. And what do you see let's do with you, Mark. What do you see the role as the Chartered Body Alliance playing in all of this work?
Well, as said earlier, I think this is a relatively new development. We were only launched March of this year, but what we have is 3 organisations that share broadly the same ethos in terms of importance of qualifications and education. It does, I guess, if you're looking at it from a consumer's perspective or even a parent's perspective with a child who's looking to enter the industry, the Chartered Body Alliance does offer a really kind of tangible face to the industry. So you can see that there are 3 well-established and relatively well-known within the sector professional bodies that are proceeding along the same lines. I think it's also fantastically helpful in our interactions with others, with policymakers as well, in that here we have the ability to offer a consolidated approach to major developments, which perhaps would have been useful in the early days of apprenticeships, looking with hindsight being a wonderful thing.
Thanks, Mark. Just from the accountancy world and the global practices, is there anything that we can share from there, Alison?
I think we do see that cooperation across professional bodies, being key to developing qualifications going forward. So yeah, I think we'd echo the sentiments of Mark there.
Yeah. Okay. Final question, Daniel. How do you think the regulators and industry bodies such as the Institute of Apprenticeships and the BSB can complement the profession of the professional bodies and organisations like the Chartered Body Alliance?
It's having them, I suppose it's flipping it around and having them listen to us and using that collective voice that you've mentioned. From bitter experience with the Institute of Apprenticeships, even though it's not that old, I know that they keep changing the goalposts on the rules, and so you create something one day that you think is going to get passed, and then the next day it doesn't. And so it's having a dialogue and working together to make sure that all right, I understand there are rules from government that need to be followed, but where there's flexibility, talk to us, work with us, and then we'll get, there's a lot of value that we can add as professional bodies. And I think the attitude of policymakers has changed over the years. I remember when I first came into a professional body, they didn't have much of a reputation with, less so regulators. I think regulators they've always had done, but policymakers in Whitehall, having come from the civil service, they just weren't on the radar, and there might have been a hangover from, I think it was Orwell who said that profession's a conspiracy against the laity, and Mrs. Thatcher didn't have much time for professional bodies either. So I think there was a long lag of that, and now they are listening to us, and so it's just making sure that we do have those links and working together.
Mark, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, is there anybody for the Institute of Apprenticeships here?
Not yet, maybe.
Okay, fine. I was actually going to be, they have a very clear remit, the Institute of Apprenticeships, but it's a complex remit, I think it's fair to say, and as a relatively new body, it will take them time to kind of find their feet. I have to say, from our dealings with them, and acknowledge some of the difficulties, we've had some really positive early engagements so far. They were actually with us a couple of weeks ago, looking at some of the workings behind the scenes of our endpoint assessment capability, where we got some great feedback and a really positive view from them. I think if there's one thing, if they were to listen to me, if there was one thing that we could recommend, is kind of look back at what has worked in the Trailblazer development process, because there are aspects of those standards which work fantastically. Certainly in my lifetime working within professional bodies, I've never seen such a number of professional bodies, number of training providers, number of employers all working together to a common goal and achieving so much so quickly. I think Trailblazers was literally trailblazing and kind of getting everybody to see the value of working together. I think the only other thing to add to that is, with the Institute of Apprenticeships, is not to lose track of the sight that policy does require that employers are in the driving seat for apprenticeship development. So while it will be tempting to kind of lean back and maybe allow policymakers to take more of a lead, I think we'd counsel that employers need to continue pushing and owning standards and developing solutions that are going to continue to work for them.
And I would agree with all of that. I think bodies like these are starting to understand professional bodies better and the good work that we all do. And also then, by understanding better what we do, hopefully it won't mean that we're competing against each other, and we can work together. And with the IFA, for instance, then of course we can promote the positive messages around apprenticeships together, rather than all of us trying to do it separately, which seems to be the case at present. So yeah, very much on that collaborative approach, similar to what we do as professional bodies, and trying to engage with those other bodies, regulators, to share that voice.
So avoiding duplication, really.
Yeah, very much so.
Complementary. Alison, last word?
I think the employer-driven aspect's great, and Institute for Apprenticeships, I think, has helped that with the Trailblazers movement. I think that the funding rules and that from the Skills Funding Agency are more of a challenge in terms of implementation, and probably our big pushback would be about some of the rules coming from there, which seem to be at times rather arbitrary.
Well, thank you, panel. That's the end of the easy questions. It's now I'm going to hand over to the floor, and I'm sure a lot of our colleagues in the room have some other questions that they would like to ask.
I think Mark said that the Chartered Body Alliance is going to give sort of much more kind of a tangible face to professional bodies. You know, to what extent do you think creating more consumer relevance or more consumer awareness around professional bodies and the roles that they support in providing services to consumers is going to be useful?
Would you like me to start? I'm sure you'll have some thoughts on this, Joe. I think it's, to be honest, I think it's an age-old challenge. I think this is something that we've grappled with, professional bodies, particularly in the financial services sector, have grappled with for some time. It's a relatively new development, but already, without wanting to sound too metropolitan, if you look around a lot of train and tube stations in London, you'll find campaigns which generally push the value of chartered status. Part of this is aimed at commuters heading off trains and heading into the City of London, but equally, I'm sure it's reaching a far wider audience in terms of understanding that there are chartered professionals in financial services. This is a difficult one to crack, I think. The great unsaid in this often is that I think there has to be an element of recognition that, frankly, at times consumers aren't that interested in qualification levels in financial services. I think perhaps increasingly individual consumers are taking less responsibility for their financial affairs. And sometimes as financial services professionals, we are in the position of giving somewhat unwelcome news to people. So I think probably there is a combination of things. I think the Chartered Bodies Alliance, the chartered bodies themselves can push this remit, and I think we all have separate initiatives to work with consumers, particularly young consumers, but at some point the general population are going to have to meet us at least halfway and show a little more interest in perhaps what we can offer them as a set of professions.
Anything to add, Daniel?
This might sound a bit strange, but I wouldn't necessarily be bothered if the public didn't know who we are, as long as they recognise that somebody who holds our chartered mark is chartered, because they recognise what chartered is, whether you're an accountant, architect, etc. And so it's for me putting everything in that badge rather than us as CII, because people might think that we're the Confederation of Indian Industry, which is a common one. It's for me, everything's in the chartered mark. Our outreach to students in schools is all around. It's called Discover Risk. We never really talk about the CII as such. It's the insurance industry. So for me as a professional, representing a professional body, we're about the collective, the whole, rather than say necessarily us. And so yeah, if they don't know who we are, then I'm happy, as long as they understand chartered.
Do you have a different view, Richard?
No, I don't actually. I think it's just getting the consumers to ask the questions about whether people are qualified, and the problem the consumers have, of course, you know, across the table here we've probably got about 40 or 50 different sort of qualifications. How are they ever going to understand what all these qualifications are? But something like chartered means something, and there's been many studies to show that the general public do understand that. So if we're going to improve the trust from consumers for people who work in this industry, promoting things like chartered, and just get them to ask the questions of what qualifications do you have. I'm sure none of us would go to a doctor if we knew this doctor hadn't passed the qualifications, or even get on a plane with a pilot that hasn't done some sort of maintaining of that competence to be able to fly it. So what's the difference with if you're opposite an advisor and just asking them, are you qualified to give me the advice and you're always looking for the best outcome for those clients.
I think the only problem with that is professionals can practice without having chartered status, whereas pilots can't fly without a pilot's license.
It leads into the whole professionalism and leading the ethical decision making and things like that. So it's understanding what it means to be chartered and the importance of that. Thank you for your question. Any other questions for Alan?
Very straightforward, simple one. How would you recommend? How would the panel recommend that they measure the success of professional bodies? One suggestion has been that a bit like doctors, architects, so on, that they are proud to have their certificate of professional status on the wall, if they have a wall, of their building or office, as a method of basically achieving the right status and success.
So, and would you like to go first in that one? So, how would the panel recommend that we measure success of professional bodies?
I think for us it's partly around the voice of our members in the wider world. So we have representation, for example, at the Davos Economic Forum. We're quite a powerful voice in policy setting in the UK and globally. So for us that's part of the value of the professional body. We would very much want people to recognise that certification too and see that as valuable. But looking at membership numbers, membership engagement would be other ways we would measure the success of the body too, as well as student numbers coming into the organisation.
I think it is a fascinating question, and I'm not volunteering to go round to people's offices at this point and check their certificates, I hasten to add. I think the kind of time scale to measure success is an interesting one, in that we're certainly aiming to have a lifelong affiliation with members. We hope that they may dip in and dip out on a fairly fluid journey, but we hope that we are a constant throughout their career as they work through financial services. And it's more the kind of longitudinal study that you could perhaps do around this to check, over a period of 5, 10, maybe even 15 years, what kind of impact the various interventions have had. I think when we talk of impact, it's impact on the individual, what it's done for their career, that's very important, but equally it's also impact on customers, impact on what positive impact have you made on the kind of customer landscape during your career, and how has your affiliation with whichever institute you work with helped you for that?
One of the things that we're developing at the moment is a public trust index, and we're fully aware that the baseline will probably be quite low, maybe not necessarily politician low, but there'll be plenty of scope to move the dial up, and so there is, as you say, the personal element for the practitioners, but also looking at the public interest side, and whether we as a professional body leading and bringing employers and practitioners with us, whether we can move that dial on public trust.
Well, we can maybe actually help you in that, because we already measure it, so I can assure you we are above gamblers. So we're definitely above those two. If I can give you an answer, I think it's simple. It's chartered status, because it's everything that we're alluding to. It's about being chartered. It's people choosing to work with institutions that value financial education and values and being part of a banking community or a professional community that believe in lifelong learning and establishing those standards. So I think it's about measuring chartered. That's your measure of success. Don't make it complicated.
But I think we can also add value by qualifications and chartered status being recognised globally as well. So when individuals are moving from into different countries, the qualifications they already hold with professional bodies like ourselves are then recognised also in other countries as well. So it's just something extra there we can add.
I can take one more. Thank you very much. One more question from the audience. Any more? Oh, yeah, chance for that.
Perhaps one of the challenges is what happens if your members step out of line. Obviously, the accountants have a path here, but do the other chartered organisations have that sort of ability to punish members who don't abide by the professional standards that they're setting?
Richard, do you want to start off?
Yeah. Yes, the simple answer is yes, we do. But we're slightly different to some of the accountancy bodies because we're not a regulatory body either. We are a voluntary body. So it's very much against our code of conduct. We have 8 principles within that code of conduct, and we'll measure whatever we're told by, whether it's from the general public, it's whether we found out, or whether firms have advised us of whatever disciplinary or some actions that the individuals have taken. We have a disciplinary committee, and it range, and the sort of sanctions will range from just a reprimand to kicking them out of the professional body. But what that doesn't stop, of course, because we're not a regulator as such, then move into another professional body. But that's where us collaborating and speaking with each other, then we'll get, and asking those right questions, even on the application forms. You know, we ask the question, have they been turned down from membership from another professional body? And trying to find and writing and asking the questions. We've got a live case as we speak now about someone who's been turned down from another professional body, and we're now investigating the reasons behind that. So yes, we do.
I'm just trying to think if there's any differences in our own or CIIs.
Not really.
We're very similar, and what I'd add to that is one of the favourite pages in our members magazine is the naming and shaming page. Since we put that in, that's had really good feedback, because members who follow the rules and signed up to professional standards want to know that we've got their back, and that if somebody is potentially dragging down the industry, that they're going to get sorted out. Sometimes there's a bit of a lag if the FCA are involved. We have to let that run its course. So it might take time, but we'll steam in and sort them out if needs be.
Thank you very much for your question, and that brings us to the end of our panel discussion.